All right, well, hey, everybody, welcome to Eagle Brook Church. Really good to have you with us today, whether you're at one of our campuses or you're viewing this message online. We are beginning a new series today. It's called What's Missing. You ever felt that way before? Ever had a time in your life where it just felt like something was off and you couldn't even necessarily put your finger on what it was, but it left you wondering what's missing? Often when that happens in our lives, our first reaction is to try to fill the void. So fill it with a relationship and that feeling of infatuation, fill it with a new business venture, fill up a glass of wine and watch Netflix. But all of those are Band-Aids. They don't solve the real problem. The three messages in this series are purpose, power, and peace. What if our lives were filled with purpose and peace and power from God? You don't find any of those on Netflix. So today's message is titled Purpose, and I wonder how many of us have this feeling that we're missing a deep meaning and God-given purpose in our lives. Several years ago, I went to fill up my gas at a local gas station. Fill up my car, rather. I had a Toyota Sienna, which is also known as a swagger wagon to some. But I went to fill up my car, I swiped the card, I pumped the gas, I pulled away, and the next day, got a phone call from the police department. I wasn't home, I was at work, so my wife picked up and she said, hello? The police officer said, ma'am, is there a Jason Strand at home? My wife said, no. He said, ma'am, is there a Jason Strand who lives in this residence? Now, first of all, if there was ever a time that my wife was gonna lie, this would have been her opportunity. I'm also grateful that my name isn't listed as the Reverend Jason Strand. I also was thankful for that. But my wife said, yes, he's my husband. The officer said, ma'am, Jason is guilty of perpetrating a pump and go against the Quick Mart. They're willing to drop the charges, but he needs to come in today and pay. A pump and go. What in the world? Apparently what happened was the credit card machine didn't read my card, which even to this day I can't figure out because I didn't push pay inside and it gave me the gas. But apparently the credit card machine didn't read my card, but I didn't know that. I also somehow missed the gas station attendant chasing after my car. He went running out of the gas station, sprinting after me, writing down my license plate number as I was pulling out onto the road. And that was really what bothered me the most about this whole thing. It's surprising to get a phone call from the police department, but it was even more shocking how oblivious I was. I didn't know it didn't read my card. I didn't see the guy running in my rearview mirror. I was oblivious. I wonder if that's how some of us go through life. We wake up in the morning, we grab our phone, we check Pinterest or Facebook, we do the work that we have for that day, or we do our school work. These days, staying at home, you wipe down the counter 7 or 8 times. If you're a parent, feels like you're always picking things up. Then you run a few errands if you need to, and you watch some TV at night, all the while oblivious to our God-given purpose. We're not even thinking about it. We're just pumping our gas and thinking about the latest COVID updates. We're thinking about a conflict that we had with our spouse or kids. We're replaying some strange interaction we had online with a person. Just thinking about the daily stuff. All the while, there's this sense in our life that something is missing. And so when the phone is put away and the TV is turned off and we turn down the lights, we lie there in bed and think to ourselves, is this it? There's got to be more to life than this. Several years ago, Tom Brady, who's the quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, used to play for the New England Patriots. He was interviewed by 60 Minutes after he had won his 3rd Super Bowl. Now, since that time, he's married a supermodel named Giselle. They have a net worth of $540 million. He's won his 6th Super Bowl and is considered by many to be the greatest quarterback of all time. But in that interview, here's what Brady said. He said, why do I have 3 Super Bowl rings and still think there's something greater out there for me? Maybe a lot of people would say, hey man, this is what it is. I reached my goal, my dream, my life. But me, I think, God, it's gotta be more than this. This can't be what it's all cracked up to be. Someday, Tom Brady's gonna have a statue of himself outside Gillette Stadium in New England. No one's making a statue of you. Okay, I mean, you may be salesperson of the month, and that's really exciting, but you're not gonna retire and 3 years later come back, walk in the break room and go, you gotta be kidding. They put a statue up of me next to the Culligan machine. It's not gonna happen. No 12-year-old boy is going, man, someday I just wanna be like Joe in accounting. I mean, I've been watching that guy since I was 9 years old. And if I can just keep practicing my Excel spreadsheets and go to the right camps, I mean, someday, maybe I can account like that accountant has accounted. It's not happening. Tom Brady has the American dream in his lap. And yet here he is openly wondering on national television, there's gotta be more than this. It's because 20 Super Bowl rings can't fill the void. And we all feel it. You don't have to be a professional athlete to feel it. We all feel it. No trophy, no paycheck, no first date can fill the void. Every one of us wants to know that our life has a purpose. Author Miles Monroe said it this way. He said, the greatest tragedy in life is not death, but a life without purpose. In the New Testament, in the book of Acts, it records a sermon that the Apostle Paul gave in a city called Pisidian Antioch. He went to the synagogue there and he was trying to reason with the Jewish people to get them to see that Jesus was the Son of God. And so he starts walking through the history of God's interactions with the nation of Israel, and he comes to King David. King David, the one who slayed the giant Goliath, wrote half the Psalms, was king of Israel. And here's what he says about David. He says, when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep. He died. That's all he said. Doesn't say anything about how prosperous Israel was when he was king. Doesn't say anything about Goliath and how little kids are going to be reading this story for centuries to come. He simply says he served God's purpose in his generation. At my first church, my senior pastor, Jimmy Jones, he once said to me, this verse was his life goal. And I remember when he said that, I was like, really? Because it's this little parenthetical verse tucked away in the book of Acts. I mean, you'd never think about it unless someone said something. But he said, my goal in life is to serve God's purposes in my generation, and then I want to hand it off to the next generation. And I was in my 20s when I heard him say this, but I remember thinking, that's what I want too. I want to serve God's purposes in my generation, and then when the time is right, I want to hand it off to the next generation. And notice whose purpose is being served here. It's not our purpose. Our purpose in life is not about us. It's not about our dreams and our desires. It's about serving God's purposes. And I think this is where a lot of us get confused, because when we start thinking about our purpose in life, we equate it with our dreams and the goals that we have for the future. But in the Old Testament, when God sent the prophet Samuel to choose the next king of Israel, they lined up all of David's brothers, and they were smarter than David and stronger than David, and they looked like a king more than David did. But none of them were chosen as king. Where was David when all this was happening? David was out watching the sheep like his dad had told him to do. Psalm 78 says this, it says, God chose David, his servant, and took him from the sheep pens. In other words, David wasn't building his resume. He wasn't strategizing on how he could expand his brand. He wasn't crossing things off his bucket list. He wasn't making a TikTok video that he hoped was gonna go viral. He was in the sheep pen. He was doing what his dad had asked him to do. In other words, kids, pause the TikTok video for a moment and go clean your room. If you're watching this message online and your teenager's in the other room, they're not really paying attention, you gotta tell them, hey, get your butt in here. God has something he wants to say to you right now. But here's what we oftentimes think about our purpose. We think it's gonna be this grand adventure that's gonna change the world forever. And sometimes that's the case. But that's often not where it begins. It often begins in the sheep pen. How many of us find ourselves in a sheep pen of sorts these days? The sheep pen is that place where life doesn't feel like it has a purpose. It feels rather mundane. Every day just kind of rolls into the next one. Maybe you're a student and you spend your days researching your thesis paper and it's just flip up the computer, go to work every day. Maybe you're a plumber and you spend your days fixing toilets and unclogging drains. You're a parent and you're cleaning up messes and you're changing diapers and you're settling sibling disputes. You're in the sheep pen. You're at that place in life where it doesn't feel like there's much purpose. It feels like everything is just mundane. But here's what I want you to see today. Often it's in the sheep pen that our purpose is formed. God does some of his best work in the sheep pen. It's that place where you're being formed and prepared. Your purpose is being built up within you. Preparation is the prerequisite to greatness. You see, David wasn't chosen because of his fame. He wasn't chosen because of his followers or his financial stability. David was chosen because he was faithful. He was faithfully doing what his father had asked him to do. Let me ask you, how could you serve God's purposes right where you're at right now? Not 5 years from now or 10 years from now or when you move to a different state or country or when you get a different job, but how could you serve God's purposes right where you're at right now? Maybe for you, it's praying for another person. And you say, you know what, I don't get to see them as much as I used to, but I'm just gonna commit to praying for them. Maybe it's bringing a meal to someone in need. Maybe it's giving to church. I don't know if you knew this or not, but a hurricane hit Nicaragua in the month of November. And one of our partners, Orphan Network, is down there. They serve over 4,000 orphans in the country of Nicaragua. And they emailed their partners and they said, one of our orphanages got hit by this hurricane and we're gonna have to shut it down. And that meant 100 orphans were gonna have to find a different place to live, a different place to find food, a different place to find education and learn about Jesus. And we sent an email back. We said, what do you need to keep that orphanage open, to repair it, to get it back to where it needs to be so those kids aren't turned out to the street? We sent them a check for $30,000. If you are a person who gives to this church, you did that. You may not even have known that you did that, but you did. And God is using you, and God has a purpose for your life. In this series, What's Missing, we're gonna be going through a book in the New Testament called Colossians. In fact, on Monday morning at 7 a.m., I'm gonna be on Facebook Live teaching through Colossians 1, verses 1 through 8. And Monday through Friday, we're gonna have a Facebook Live every day at 7 a.m. through this whole series. So I encourage you to tune in for those. We're also asking everybody in our church to read through the book of Colossians. Because if you feel like something is missing in your life, I am telling you, Colossians is gonna speak to it. Talks about purpose and power and peace. It talks about how Jesus Christ is supreme over everything else. In fact, in chapter 1, verse 9, here's what Paul writes. He says, we continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will. So Paul says, I was continually asking God, I was praying for the people of Colossae that they would know God's will, that they would know God's purpose for their life. He says, through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work. That is your purpose. To please God in every way and to do the good works for which God created you to do. See, I put my head on the pillows at night sometimes and I just congratulate myself for not being a total jerk that day. But really, my purpose isn't just to avoid doing bad things. My purpose is to do the good works that God created me to do. Author John Maxwell says it this way. He says, once you find your why, you will find your way. That's what I want to try to do in this message. I want to try to help you find your why. Because if you find your why, if you know why God created you and the purpose he has for your life, you are going to find your way. If your kids know their why, your kids are going to find their way. But if you don't know your why, if you don't know the purposes that God has for your life, you're going to consistently go through life and go, man, what's missing? I can't even put my finger on it. I can just feel it, but I don't know what it is, but something is missing. Several years ago, our former senior pastor, Bob Merritt, gave a message where he asked 3 questions. And it was because of that message that my wife and we talked about it for several weeks later, and my wife started serving in our student ministries as a result of that message. She leads a small group of 20 ninth grade girls, which sounds terrifying to me, but it's part of the purposes that God has for her life. It's not the only purpose, but it's some of the good works that God created her to do. And in that message, Bob asked 3 questions. And I want to ask those 3 questions to you today because I believe that if you can answer these 3 questions, you will know your why. Here's the first question. What makes you cry? You know one of the things that makes me cry? Opening up the refrigerator and seeing that the juice that my wife bought just for me was gone and I didn't get a sip of it. Now you may be saying, your wife buys juice just for you? That's kind of strange. Well, guess what? The last time she bought juice for the family, I didn't get any. And I let people know about it. I let people know I wasn't real happy with that. And I'm an only child, so my wife gives me a little extra grace. So she went out and she bought juice and she said, this is for Dad. But I have 5 little bloodsuckers at home, also known as my children, and they drank the whole thing again, and I didn't even get 1 sip, and it makes me want to cry. Now, I'm kidding about that, but here's what I mean about this question. What makes you cry? What breaks your heart? Is there anything in this world or in your life that you look at and you just go, man, I am so bothered by that. I am at such a level of discomfort. Somebody needs to do something about that. One author called this a holy discontent. Is there something in your life that you're discontent about in a holy kind of way? It's not just discontent about yourself, but you're really bothered for God. And you have a holy discontent. You say, you know what? Somebody needs to do something about that. Here's what makes me cry. When I see someone who's living their life without a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Because I did that for the first year of college. I was just trying to do everything in my own power and my own strength. And I didn't know I could open up the Bible and God would speak to me. And I didn't know I could pray and talk to God about how I was feeling and how I was doing. And so I was just trying to do it on my own, and I was exhausted and I was defeated. And so when I see someone going through life and they don't have this personal relationship with Christ, it just makes me want to cry. When I see someone who's a teenager or a college student and they are giving in to sexual temptation, or they're partying away their 20s because of peer pressure, that makes me want to cry. I so desperately want them to know that God has a greater purpose for your life, and don't miss that. Don't give that away so easily. When I see someone who's being hurt, maybe they've been through a divorce, or they're being bullied or abused, that breaks my heart. Let me ask you, what is it that makes you cry? Maybe for you, it's teen pregnancies. Maybe for you, it's an addiction. You see people who are stuck in the cycle of an addiction, and you know what that's like. You've been through that. You've lived that. And so something in you just goes, man, someone needs to help. Someone needs to do something to help them break free and experience God's grace. Maybe for you, it's the erosion of godliness and truth in our culture, biblical truth, and you just say, somebody's got to do something about that. One of my wife and I's good friends, she grew up in an abusive home. But God used that experience in her life to give her a heart for kids. And so even though her and her husband have 5 kids, they recently adopted a 6th. Because kids who are hurting, kids who need a home, kids who need a safe and secure childhood, her heart just breaks for that. It's part of the good works that God put her on planet Earth to do. Let me ask you, what makes you cry? Because when you answer that question, when you figure out what makes you cry, you are on your way to finding your why. Here's the second question I hope you'll ask. What makes your heart beat faster? What does that for you? A week from this past Wednesday, I was over at my parents' house watching the NBA draft, and I had no idea that all my dreams were about to come true. If you've been attending Eagle Brook for more than a couple of years, you know that I used to have this running joke about my love for Ricky Rubio, who was the point guard for the Minnesota Timberwolves at the time. I was one of the crazy fans that went down to the airport in 2009 when Rubio was a floppy-haired 18-year-old teenager flying over from Barcelona, Spain. I was at the airport to welcome him and greet him to Minnesota. One of my friends that night was watching WCCO News, the sports segment, and they were doing a story on all these fans that had showed up at the airport. And he paused his TV and he took a picture. And here's the picture that he got on his TV. I'm not even sure I've ever looked at my wife like that. But I remember where I was when Ricky Rubio was traded. I mean, you might remember where you were on 9/11 or when JFK was murdered or something like that, but I remember where I was when Rubio was traded. I was in my backyard playing catch with my son, and my wife came to the window and she yelled down to me. She said, "You need to come in here." She said, "Your phone is blowing up." And then she added, "I think Ricky Rubio might have just been traded." And just like that, he was gone. He was off to Utah and then to Phoenix and then a pit stop in Oklahoma City. But I'm here today to tell you that God has a plan. God knew that I was struggling to come up with illustrations for my messages, and what a huge thing it would be to bring back all my Rubio stories, all my Rubio jokes, and actually have them relevant again. And so on the Wednesday night of the NBA draft, the Timberwolves traded for Ricky Rubio, coming home to Minnesota, and everything is good in my life again. Now that actually does make my heart beat a little bit faster, but here's what makes me feel alive. Do you have anything that just brings you such joy, it just makes you feel alive? One of the things for me is when I see someone getting baptized. I watch them go under the water and they let go of their sin and their shame and their guilt. And they come up out of the water and they're a new creation in Christ. And God is transforming their life. It just makes my heart beat faster. When I see one of my kids work hard at something and they achieve their goal, and I see the confidence and joy in their life, that makes my heart beat faster. When I hear about someone coming to church for the first time, if my wife says, "Did you hear so-and-so started coming to church?" Nothing excites me more than that. I'm like, you gotta be kidding. And I can just feel the joy and feel my heart beating faster. What is that for you? What makes your heart beat faster? In 2 Corinthians chapter 5, Paul says this. He says, God has given us the task of reconciling people to himself, which means that each of us might have different gifts. We might have different small p purposes. So my purpose might be to communicate God's truth, and your purpose might be to talk to people and try to lead them to faith or to give. But all of us have a capital P purpose. It's something that we all share in common. He says God has given us the task, God has given us the purpose of reconciling people to himself. We are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. An ambassador is the highest ranking diplomat or official sent from one country as a representative to another. Maybe a more simple way of thinking about this is one that I heard Pastor Craig Groeschel use. He said it's like the hall pass. Remember in elementary school when the teacher would say, "Hey, I've got this package and I need it taken down to the principal's office. Any volunteers?" And you're like, "Ooh, pick me. It sounded like such an adventure to take a package down to the principal's office. And then you'd get out into that big empty hallway. And you'd walk past your friend's classroom and your friends are working on a test and they'd look up and what are you doing out there? How'd you get out there? And you're like, whoa, hall pass. Or you're walking through the hallway and the teacher stops you and they're like, get back to your class. What are you doing out here? And you're like, hall pass. I've been chosen and appointed by my teacher to do something special. The Bible says that we are an ambassador of Christ, which means that we have been chosen and appointed by God. That means that you're not just a student. You're not just in school to get good grades and make some friends and play some sports. You are an ambassador of Christ, strategically placed by God in that school to be a leader for Christ, to be an influencer for Christ, and to be a light in dark places. You are not just in HR. You are an ambassador of Christ, strategically placed by God into the HR department of your business. And your purpose is to pray for your coworkers, to treat them with kindness, to do a great job. And when the time is right, to invite them to church or into a relationship with God. You are not just a parent. That son or that daughter was a gift given to you by God so that you can lead them to know and to love Jesus Christ. You are an ambassador of Christ. I hope that excites you. I hope that fires you up a little bit. What makes you cry? What makes your heart beat faster? And then here's the final question. What are you good at? Because you can be passionate about something, but not good at it. If every time you try to sing, people shush you, it's like, bring it down a little bit. And then glass starts to break. I mean, that's not a good sign. That might not be your purpose. And this is hard, I know, because I used to teach a grad level course for people who wanted to go into ministry and they wanted to speak and communicate. And every semester, I'm no joke, there would be at least 2 students who just weren't great at it. And you'd have to have a hard conversation and say, do you think you can get better at this? Or do you think maybe God has gifted you in a different way? I'll talk to business leaders sometimes. And they'll say, I'm gonna quit my job, I'm gonna go into ministry. And sometimes that is what God is asking them to do. But other times I'll say, what if you stayed in your business and you made money and then you gave money to the causes that reflect the heart of Christ? Because you're good at that. And God has gifted you with that. Most of us know this, but our purpose has very little to do with what we gain, has everything to do with what we give. So I'm all about using the time and resources that God's given you to benefit others and lead them to Christ. If you spend your whole time and all your resources in life and all your dreams and all your goals are about entertaining yourself and accumulating more for yourself, you are gonna miss your God-given purpose. Our purpose has very little to do with our house or a vacation home, or has very little to do with our yard or our toys. It has everything to do with using the time and resources we have to benefit others. My nephew stayed at our house for a week recently. My nephew is 7 years old. And his mom is a single mom, and she had to work that week, and her school went to distance learning only. And 7-year-old boys and distance learning, they're not great friends. And so we said, you know what, while you're at work, we'll take him for the week and try to help him with his school. But here's what you have to know about my 7-year-old nephew. He's crazy. Like 7-year-old boy, crazy. Every time I would turn around, he would be into something. So I turned my head for a little bit doing something else, and I went down to the basement, and he had built a fort using lawn chairs from the garage, a mini fridge from the storage room. There was things in that fort that I was like, I don't think this is ours. Like, where did you get this? You get this from the neighbors? Like, what is this? He put a skateboard out in the garage, and then he covered it with leaves as a trap so that I would walk out, step on this thing, and break my back, apparently. Then I came home and he had taped all of our light switches to the on position, which is brilliant, I mean, in some ways, but I came home, I'm like, why are all the lights on? I went to turn them off and he had taped them all into the on position. So I had to peel off the tape of all these lights to actually turn them off. And it was like that the whole week. And so by the end of the week, not just because of what was going on at home, but because of things at work, I was just empty. I was just exhausted. And I felt like one day was moving into the next, and I thought, God, where's the purpose in this? But that whole week, every time I would pray and try to figure out what was going on, I would sense God saying to me, love on him. My 7-year-old nephew, his father is not in his life right now. And I thought he needs an adult male to invest in him and encourage him and at times discipline him, but just to love on him. And so to the best of my abilities, that's what I tried to do that whole week. A few days before he left, my wife called me at work. I was about to head into a staff meeting, and she said she was talking with our nephew, and he said, Uncle Jason is my favorite adult in the world. And when I heard her say that, I was walking into staff meeting, it just brought me to tears. Because that whole week, I just felt like God was saying, love on him. He needs someone in his life who loves him and cares for him and lifts him up and shows him what it means to be a man. And as if that wasn't good enough, then he said to my wife, and you're my second favorite, which I love because nobody likes me more than my wife, apparently, except for him. But here's what I learned that week. Oftentimes, our purpose is right in front of us. That whole week, I was saying, oh, God, what are you doing? What's my purpose? And the whole week, it was right in front of me. Maybe you're a parent right now and you just feel like I'm tired, I've got a baby, I'm exhausted, or you're trying to homeschool your kids at the same time of getting your own work done. And it just feels like, God, where are you? What's the purpose in this? You need to know that maybe your purpose is right in front of you. Maybe it's to help your son or daughter become a man or woman of God. Maybe for you, you feel isolated and disconnected right now. And maybe your purpose is to reach out to someone else who feels that way. And send them a text message or call them. You know, call your parents, call your grandparents, send someone a text message, just go, man, I love you. How are you doing? And just encourage them. Maybe you have a loved one who's going through a health issue. And you spend a lot of time praying for them and sitting at the edge of a bed watching them sleep. Or maybe you're going through something right now where you're not able to get out like you used to and life is just different. One author says that our purpose in life is to glorify and enjoy God forever. And I love that last part, to enjoy God forever. I mean, anybody can do that. Anybody can wake up in the morning and go, God, would you just speak to me? I'm going to open up my Bible and would you just speak into my life? And I'm going to pray and talk to you about how I'm doing and how I'm feeling. And I'm going to put on some worship music and I'm going to join the angels in heaven whose whole purpose is to sing praise and glory and honor to God forever and ever. God, no matter what happens in my life today, I'm going to be grateful and I'm going to enjoy you. What makes you cry? What makes your heart beat a little faster? And what is it that you're good at? Because when you find your why, you will find your way. It struck me this week that if we don't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, it's always going to feel like something's missing. Our ultimate purpose in life is to know our Creator and to follow him and serve his purposes. And so if you don't have a personal relationship with Jesus where you have trusted him with your whole life, I want to lead you in a prayer to do that. And for others of us, maybe you feel like you're in the sheep pen right now. You're at that place in life where it just doesn't feel like there's much purpose. It just feels like every day runs into the next and it's all mundane. And I'm praying that maybe God would show you that his purpose for you is right in front of you. Let's pray together. Lord, if there's anybody watching this message or who feels like something is missing in their life, and maybe it's purpose, maybe it's a sense of meaning, God, I pray right now that first, that they would turn to you, that they would put their faith and their trust in Jesus Christ. They would know their Creator and know the purposes that you have for their life. And so God, right now in the quietness of their own mind, they're just gonna pray these words with me. Jesus, I put my faith, my trust in you. I believe that you died on the cross to pay for my sins. God, right now I confess my sin to you. I turn away from it and I ask for your forgiveness and your grace. And God, I receive the free gift of eternal life. God, I pray that you would give me a knowledge of your will. Pray that you would show me what your purposes are for my life. What are the good works that you created me to do? And God, for others of us who feel like we're in the sheep pen, God, help us to know that you're forming us. You're shaping us. You do some of your best work in those seasons where it feels like there's no purpose. But God, you're preparing us and you're growing in us. And sometimes our purposes are right in front of us. And so God, if there's a person in our life that you want us to love, if there's a person in our life that you want us to invest in or to invite to church or to lead to you, if there's some good work that you've created us to, God, I pray that we would hear your voice this week and that we would obey. Pray this all in Jesus' name, amen. Hey, before you go anywhere, if you prayed that prayer with me, text the word begin to 75787, or you can comment begin down in the comment section if you're watching this on Facebook or some platform like that. We want to give you some free resources that will really help you get started in your relationship with Jesus Christ. Have a great weekend, everybody.